Joining me in the studio is Doug Herbert, our international affairs commentator. Doug, it appears we've been talking about this for days, but we do appear to be that much closer to a deal.
Yeah, and look, the volume of promising statements, if you will, from high-level officials and people directly involved in the negotiations to secure a hostage deal, we're hearing more and more from them specifically. But then again, everything has to come with disclaimers here. The families of the hostages have been disappointed before. We've had false alarms in the past, which is not to say this is one of them. Look, we've been hearing for days and the basic contours of what a deal is expected to look like have not changed, right? You would have limited pauses in the fighting between the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and Hamas militants. You would also perhaps have some form of humanitarian aid, especially fuel, which is in desperate dire need in Gaza, being able to be brought in. And of course, perhaps an exchange of a small number of Palestinian prisoners being held in Israeli jails. Those are the broad outlines. But like you said, the devil's in the details. Like I said, actually, the devil's in the details here, because there are these minor obstacles, as the Qatari official foreign minister put it the other day, and what actually is the prime minister. And what are they? They're things like Hamas wanting a total pause in aerial and surveillance flights. And remember, the entire IDF operation, or most of it until the ground invasion, was all airstrikes. And to this day, most of the devastation we've seen in Gaza is due to airstrikes, that is, attacks from the air, Israeli aircraft. So they'd like perhaps a pause in that. But also there's the sheer logistical nightmare, that's the only word to use, of being able of having to round up, that is, get all of the hostages that would be released. The numbers have varied, right, from 50 to 70, women and children, not civilian men, not soldiers. Round them up, find them, not just being held by Hamas, but presumably perhaps by other groups, including Islamic Jihad. That is no easy task. So you can imagine how hairy that's going to be of a task. And then the monitoring of compliance with the whole thing as well. The one positive sign is we do have the International Committee of the Red Cross. The actual president of that committee has gone to Qatar for direct talks, presumably to meet with the Hamas officials and everything. So like you said, to begin with what your question, that is perhaps the most promising sign so far, that we are on the brink of something.
But of course, the Israeli ministers are going to have to vote on this still, and they've expressed very public hostility to any notion of a ceasefire. So that process itself is not going to be easy, is it?
To say the least. There are so many moving parts and potential sort of obstacles when it comes to who will sign off on this deal, a potential deal. We know that the war cabinet itself, not of which the far-right ministers, the government, are not a part, but Benny Gantz, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, they're themselves opposed on this issue. Benny Gantz, the National Unity Party, really in the camp that says seize the moment. Let's save as many hostages as we can now. Every moment that passes, every hour that passes, the equation becomes more difficult to try to get those hostages out as the fighting perhaps intensifies. Then the opposing camp, diametrically opposed view, Yoav Gallant, a lot of the Israeli intelligence and security military chiefs sort of are in this camp that, you do not dial down the pressure right now. If anything, you intensify the pressure on Hamas. You do not concede anything to them. And this is really perhaps much more in the direction of the far-right ministers who would also have to sign off, perhaps not officially on the deal, because the war cabinet is the one that overseeing this war. But we know that they are vehemently opposed to anything that smacks of even the tiniest iota of a concession to Hamas. We heard one of the ministers take a lot of flack from Netanyahu for suggesting just bomb them all a little over a week ago, a nuclear bomb. So that's the type of language you're hearing from the far right. And then there's also a question of whether the Supreme Court itself has to also sign off on this deal. There are a lot of moving parts here. That said, when and if a deal were to come, my hunch is that it will be passed in some way, shape, or form.
Doug Herbert, thank you for that.